The guy who's subservient to the national party is Tim Ryan, who's been begging for these guys to come into this race and save him from the campaign that he's been running. So look, it's ridiculous.
JD, you're on tape, brother. You're on tape, man.
I never said that, Tim. Go and run the tape and find out exactly what I said.
It'll be like 30 minutes and we're all going to know you're lying.
You've seen the attack ads. You've heard the rhetoric from the rallies. But who are the top contenders looking to represent Ohio in the U.S. Senate? We're stripping away the political labels so that you can make up your mind based on their ideas, not their parties. Because, as an OSU student puts it,
I just look for somebody that I can relate with, somebody who relates with my values and just my core. So it's not always about the views, it's sometimes just about the person they are.
Well, one thing is guaranteed, you're not going to agree 100% with either of the two candidates featured tonight. But in a few cases, you'll find that they do agree with each other. Up first, we meet the political newcomer.
I'm sick in sum, ladies and gentlemen, of the left that is destroying this country, and I'm sick of the rhino Republicans who refuse to do anything to fight back against it.
He calls himself the conservative outsider and was propelled to the Republican nomination by a timely endorsement.
I want to pick somebody that's going to win, and this man is going to win. Come on up, J.D.
J.D. Vance grew up in Middletown, a child of divorce and the opioid epidemic. He joined the Marines, graduated from OSU, then Yale Law. If you've read his book, Hillbilly Elegy, you already know that. In the introduction to your book, you write that you haven't accomplished anything great in your life to justify a memoir. You quote, "I am not a senator, a governor, or a former cabinet secretary." Is this race your something great?
Well, I guess you don't have to accomplish something great to be a United States Senator, clearly. There are a lot of people who have accomplished basically nothing who are serving in politics in our country.
What'd you think of the movie?
It's so weird. Somebody once described making a movie as like out of a book as like a hostage situation. You just drop your book off and you never see it again. My biggest thing is I just wanted them to get mail all right. She was such an unbelievable, larger-than-life figure. I didn't want them to screw her up, and I thought they did such a good job.
Care for wine, sir?
Have some. They're serving the good stuff.
Red or white?
Netflix got Ron Howard to direct it and Glenn Close and Amy Adams to star in it.
At some point, you're going to have to take responsibility.
Yeah, one of your ads, you said growing up in Middletown, you had something that Ohio kids don't have today, and that's safety.
Sure.
Streets are exploding with drugs and violence, while liberals...
Your book deals, though, with the decay in society in large extent and the trauma that you endured going through that.
Sure.
So are we safer today or less safe than we were when you grew up?
Oh, I think we're definitely less safe than we were when I grew up. I mean, look, we had a dysfunctional home in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. Things weren't always easy in my home, but our streets were safe, right? You could walk down the streets of an American city, an American small town, and expect that you would be safe in your person. You would expect that nobody would come along and steal your car from you. Look at the crime rates in Columbus, in Cleveland, in Cincinnati, not even just in the big cities, in some of our smaller towns in Ohio, we've seen skyrocketing crime. That's not good.
And a large part of the contributing factors to that is the opioid epidemic,
of course,
which continues here.
Of course.
What's your solution to it? And you've been touched so deeply by it.
Yeah, no, I really have. And I mean, I've seen it destroy families. I've seen it destroy my family. And luckily, I'm very, very proud of my own mom, because she's been clean and sober for 7 years, and just an amazing blessing for our family to have experienced that. When people say, I'm done, I want to go to rehab, I want to get in recovery, a lot of times they don't have options available to them. So we've got to properly resource and make sure we support the rehab facilities, the mental health facilities that are going to get people back on their feet. But I also think about this in terms of second chances. The reason our family got a second chance is because though mom did have some addiction problems, she never took something that killed her. That fentanyl is what's preventing a lot of second chances. That's why we have to stop it from coming into this country in the first place.
How do you do that?
It's a border security problem. It's also a China relations problem. Here's the basic fentanyl issue. It's actually 3 steps, right? It's not easy to make fentanyl, right? This is not making meth in a trailer. This is really complicated stuff. You got to fight it at each stage. You got to go after the drug dealers who are distributing this stuff. You've got to close the borders so the cartels stop getting this stuff in mass into our country, and then you've got to be willing to penalize the Chinese. And they know what they're doing. They know they're weakening this country in the process. If you don't stop doing it, you're going to pay some economic consequences.
Well, for your nonprofit, your addiction recovery nonprofit, you hired Dr. Sally Sattel, former employee of Purdue Pharma. You're getting questioned on that. What's your defense of that?
You know, look, I don't know Sally's history, and I don't really care what Sally believes. I care about what she did when she was in Ohio. And when she was in Ohio, she treated patients. We did help people. We did get a kinship guardian bill passed that makes it easier for grandparents to take care of the grandkids who are orphaned by the opioid problem. And I also didn't take any money out of it. I put my own money into the nonprofit. And so was it perfect? Did it solve the crisis? Clearly no, but it did a lot of good, and I'm proud of it.
And this is one of the great tricks that I think the sexual revolution pulled on the American populace, which is this idea that, like, well, okay, these marriages were fundamentally, you know, they were maybe even violent, but certainly they were unhappy. And so getting rid of them and making it easier for people to shift spouses like they change their underwear, that's going to make people happier in the long term.
Family's been a hot topic around you lately here. You want to clarify your comments on divorce and any misinformation that may be coming out about that?
All I've said is it's really important for us to have kids growing up in 2-parent families. It's not always going to happen. You're always going to have unexpected things happen. And the point that I've made is actually we haven't solved the domestic violence problem. In fact, we've made it worse. We haven't given kids more access to secure and stable homes. In fact, we've made it worse. Maybe what we're doing right now when it comes to family policy just doesn't work.
Let's look at the abortion issue. If you win, Republicans could be back in the majority.
Sure.
Lindsey Graham has floated this idea of a 15-week abortion ban.
Right.
Would you support that plan?
Yeah, so I think two answers to this question, right? I think broadly speaking, you want this to be a state issue. You want the states to be able to make decisions. Now, at the same time, I'm actually okay with some federal minimum standard. I mean, we're talking about 15 weeks. That's a fully formed baby. That's a baby who can feel pain. That's something that no civilized country in Europe and South America, no civilized country allows elective abortion on a 4-month-old baby. I don't think we should let it happen here in this country either.
You had a ringside seat for that nose-to-nose between Mike Gibbons and Josh Mandel in the primary.
I did.
Has it gotten out of hand? Has the political climate gotten out of hand?
I think it definitely has. I mean, people have to take themselves a little bit less seriously. I think that's true on both the left and the right. I remember that debate, that moment happening and thinking to myself, is this really happening?
Right.
And of course it did. And I'm just, I'm glad I had the wherewithal to stay out of it.
You have a lot in common with Tim Ryan. Both grew up in small Ohio towns. You have Irish ancestry. Your parents divorced. You both graduated from college. You're both into politics. As I say, a lot of symmetry there. Why are your views so different, do you think?
Well, I mean, in a lot of ways, Tim Ryan's run his entire campaign pretending that he agrees with me on everything. So I guess, Tim Ryan, yeah, we certainly have some similarities, but I think that really what my upbringing and what my background led me to believe is that, one, workers deserve dignity. They demand and require good jobs. That's an important part of any community flourishing. And second, we should be very, very pro-family. I don't know why he attacks me for saying it's important to have a mom and dad each home, but he does, and that's his business.
Your opponent voted 100% with Democratic leadership in this
Sure.
current session of Congress.
Yeah.
Would you do the same if elected for the Republican leadership?
Certainly not. And I tell people all the time, look, it's really weird to vote 100% of the time with your own party. Like, you didn't even on one single issue think about taking the opposite vote. Nobody agrees with anybody 100% of the time. What I tell people is, look, I expect to win. I expect to come back and ask for re-election 6 years from now. And if I come back and ask for your vote for re-election and I voted with my own party 100% of the time, you need to throw me out of office, because that means I've not been a good public servant for the people of Ohio. I've been a rubber stamp for my own party, and that's not what we need.
Last question. What do you want Ohioans to know about J.D. Vance?
I have 3 focuses when I get to Washington. It's lowering prices and ending this inflation crisis. It's closing down the southern border so that we end the fentanyl crisis. And it's reinvesting in our police and our law enforcement so that our streets are safer. Those 3 things are what I'm going to focus on. And if you agree with me on those issues, I'd love to have your vote.
Sort of feel like an overnight success, 10 years in the making.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess it's certainly crazy to be here, and I think about my life and how lucky I am to be here, and now I'm running for Senate. It's a pretty cool thing, and if I think about what I really want this state to be, what I really want the country to be, is I'd like it to be the sort of country where even if you don't grow up rich and you didn't do everything the right way, you still get to have a good chance, right?
Yeah.
I love that America is a country of second chances. I want to keep it that way.
You can almost make a movie out of it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Turns out they did. Yeah.
Vance also outlined his plan to curb inflation. He says we have to stop the taxing and the government spending so we can bring down our debt. Of course, the taxing is what brings in the money to pay down that debt, which now stands at more than $31 trillion. Up next, the congressman from Northeast Ohio.
A guy over here broke down and cried as he was telling me. He's like, I'm really worried about if we don't get this election right, what will happen. He's a 70-year-old guy in Lima, Ohio, concerned about the democracy. It's real. It's real.
So what would you want Ohioans to know about Tim Ryan?
Mostly where I'm from, there's no extremism. We're very pragmatic people from the Mahoning Valley that want to do good.
20 years since he was first elected to Congress, Tim Ryan is looking to relocate from one side of the Capitol to the other. He tells me all those years representing Akron and Youngstown have prepared him to represent the entire state. I caught up with him on the campaign trail.
I'm leaving on that New River train. I'm leaving on that New River train. The same old train that brought me here, and it's soon going to carry me.
An old-fashioned whistle stop in a city built on manufacturing. Lima is known for making trains and tanks. But there's no politician riding this line. Instead, Tim Ryan pulled up in a big red bus with one mission in mind.
We're gonna turn this county blue.
Whatever your choice of colors, he tells an enthusiastic crowd it's time to peel off the labels.
Democrats, Republicans, and Independents, the exhausted majority who's tired of the games, we're tired of the hate, we're tired of the anger, right? We're tired of the division. We want to be Americans, right? We want to be Americans.
It's a sentiment he echoed with me during the 15 minutes allotted before the bus had to get rolling again. This is a town built by trains and used to build trains. It brings to mind this sort of call, this plea by you to get on the train of inclusivity here.
Yeah.
And getting Americans back together again. Speak to that.
Yeah, the people are exhausted. The division has been going on now. I mean, when you really think about it, back to Vietnam. Mm-hmm. We've been divided at each other's throats. And it's like, okay, we have China coming at us, partnering with Russia. Are we going to sit here and fight for the next 10 years and cede the world to them? Or are we going to get together and say, well, we're going to have to agree on everything, but what do we agree on that's going to make America strong? And that's why I say we got to be Americans first, then Democrats and Republicans. But if we're not Americans first, this thing's not going to work.
He's taking that message right into the Fox den, so to speak.
Well, that's right. You're very moderate.
Healthcare, bread and butter
You're
stuff.
hanging out in the middle like most of us are.
I'm Tim Ryan, and I approve this message.
You have an interesting campaign strategy. It's hard to find the word Democrat anywhere in your campaign strategy. Why is that?
I just think it's like I think most people are beyond it. Like, we're tired of the party stuff. I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, I wear a red shirt, I wear a blue shirt. That's exhausting. Stop. It's like, yeah, I'm a Democrat, but you know what? I got Republicans I love and care about that are in my family that have good ideas, and we should talk because, Democrats aren't right on everything either. And I just think we've got to get this age of stupidity behind us, the age of anxiety behind us, and that starts with us saying, look, we're Americans first.
Do you really think, with all the years you spent in Congress, that the people in Congress really believe all of the rhetoric that comes out of their mouth?
No. But the scary part is half do, which is a lot more than you would think. Where I'm from, you have fights, you have arguments, and then you shake hands and have a beer. And that's what we got to get back to. Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill, they'd fight till 5 o'clock p.m. and then they'd go have a a beer or a whiskey after and, be friends and play cards. Like, we got to get back to that, and that's what I want to bring to the Senate.
How far away are we from that in Congress right now?
It's going to depend on the election. I think if we wholly reject the extremism, if we say like, no, the election happened, maybe my side lost, but it happened, and that's going to undermine our democracy. If we get enough of those Republicans, which I think we really are going to, then we can move on with some honest conversations about, how do we reduce deficits? How do we balance the budget? How do we make investments? How do we, provide for our kids' future and make America strong so China doesn't dominate the global economy?
Ryan is embracing what's essentially been a Republican talking point for the past several years, separating from a dependence on Chinese-made products.
We can't continue to allow China
China is gaming the system.
He even released a minute-long ad back in March.
It's definitely China. One word, China.
It is us versus China.
And
How
instead
do you
of
think a
taking them
place
on-
like Lima, Ohio, reflects the state of this state and also the nation?
A lot more places like this than like Dublin or, places in Columbus. And, I think that's really what the election's about. We've got really great things happening, Intel and so many exciting cutting edge companies of the future. The question's going to be, how do you plug in Lima? How do you plug in Youngstown? How do you plug in Portsmouth? And that, to me, if we want to really have a strong middle class, these communities got to have a big comeback.
You went to Youngstown State, Bowling Green.
Yeah.
How'd you pay for it? And are you opposed to President Biden's plan to forgive student loans?
Yeah. My grandparents had good jobs and saved up money, and they were able to help us afford with some government help with the Pell Grants. We got to make college more affordable. I just, to me, I think there's a better way to do it. I don't think we can afford this right now, given everything that we've done through the pandemic, all of these big investments that we've made. Like, we've got to start, being concerned about debt and deficits. Look, my wife has student loans that we're paying. I just think allow people to negotiate down the interest rates down to 1 or 2% from 8, 9, 10, 12%. That's going to put significant money into people's pockets without a $300 billion bill. And we've got to get into some deficit reduction now. And I think it's important that, we find creative ways to put money in people's pockets without, blowing up the debt and the deficits.
Okay. Why do you think you'd make a better U.S. Senator than your opponent?
I know Ohio better, way better. I understand the people of Ohio better. I know what what their struggles have been coming from outside of Youngstown. And I think that's half the battle, understanding the pain, the struggle, but also the hope that, like, dang it, we want to get this thing going, and that's been what I've done in Congress. And we went from, a community that was just losing jobs. Now we're literally in the empty General Motors facility. We're literally building electric cars, electric trucks, electric tractors. Foxconn came in, bought the facility, and they're announcing a 4th car here pretty soon. There's a battery plant across the street making batteries for General Motors. So I've been in this struggle for 20 years. There's no magic wand to fix, 40 years of globalization and corporate greed.
In those 20 years, he's seen Ohio turn from a solid purple to a strong red. The only exception, perhaps to his benefit, is in the Senate, where Democrat Sherrod Brown continues to win races.
Thank you, Ohio!
Ryan, though, distances himself from accusations of being true blue.
Tim Ryan pretends he's with you.
I don't answer to any political party.
Your opponent says your TV Tim claims that you stand up against your party aren't true. When you're in D.C., he says you vote with the party 100% of the time.
Yeah, I know it's very frustrating for J.D. Vance. I ran against Nancy Pelosi publicly, for 2 months. And on TV, gave a speech in front of all of my colleagues with her in the room, took on Bernie Sanders. I've opposed Biden's, positions on student loans and other things very publicly. So this is in direct contrast to what Donald Trump said about him from the stage in Youngstown. He called him an ass kisser. Like, that's not me. Like, when I vote with President Biden, it's because it's good for Ohio, where I'm not afraid to disagree with my party, and you can ask the top Democrats in the country about it, and I reckon I'll be a pain in the rear end to Chuck Schumer too when I get there.
I did ask Ryan about his flip on abortion. He was pro-life until 2015, but says that his mind was changed over time after talking to women in tragic circumstances. Ryan wants to go back to life under Roe v. Wade. One final thought, straight ahead.
My little Italian grandmother had a saying for this when she met somebody like J.D. Vance. Due facce. You have two faces.
Tim Ryan keeps on saying he's reasonable, but when he gets to Washington, he votes exactly the opposite way.
Well, the bickering continues, even though they agree on a lot of the same issues. So if you're still undecided, take advice from the college student. Pick the one who seems the most genuine to you. Reminds me of something that the late Senator John McCain once wrote. Our shared values define us more than our differences. Election Day is November 8th.